This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I thank you very much for listening to That Will Nevr Work podcast. So, a great idea won't get funded unless you know how to pitch it. I have Garrett, who's going to join me today to share what it takes to make a irresistible pitch deck to investors. We'll talk about it right after this.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Nevr Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
All right. So I have Garrett Dailey with me, and here's the thing. You know, of course, all his information will be in the show notes, so we don't have to go through all his accolades, even though he is very well accomplished and done a lot in his life. But I encourage you to go take a look at that information. So, Garrett, I have a question for you. If someone only has 60 seconds to explain their business to a potential investor, how should they structure their pitch so the person listening to them doesn't say to them, well, tell me more, instead of walking away more confused? What should be included?
Yeah, so one of the things that people screw up the most, I think, is they don't understand the difference between talking to a customer and talking to an investor. So meaning, like more broadly, there's a big difference between sales and pitching, right? So I've had a lot of people, this is one of the more common things that I find with clients is, especially people that are good at sales, will treat it like it's a sales call. And they focus a lot on the product and how the product works and all the features and the benefits and stuff like that. And that's less important to investors. Like, frankly, if you had to say, I have, pitch A, where I'm only going to talk about the product and the features and benefits, or pitch B, where I'm not going to tell you what the product is, but I'm going to tell you everything else about the model and the market and how we're going to market and all that kind of stuff. Pitch B would be better, which is weird. The product isn't actually as essential to it as you think. It's just enough about that they understand the gist, right? I like to tell people at max, your product has 3 easy steps as to how it solves the problem. It's more important that it's solving this problem and that problem is a big market opportunity than it is how, granularly how you're getting into that, right? So if you got a minute, you want to, for an investor, you want to be able to communicate with regards to yourself, something about empathy, authority, and a special understanding of this problem, how you can relate to that. So really quickly, you're like, hey, while I was working at Google, if you work at Google, you're playing on easy mode. So good for you. Most of us didn't, right? But if you say, while I was working at Google in such and such department as the head of blah, 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 I realized that there's this really big problem that me and my team had. So I started trying to look into it. And it turns out that this is a $100 billion market, right? And everyone's struggling with this problem. We built a system that solves this. And we're, going out through influencer marketing or something like that. So we're looking for, $500K to get our initial revenue cooking or something like that, right? So you can see in there, like, there's a lot of other stuff you could talk about. I don't know how long that was actually, and I was kind of...
It's good.
But let's say that was like 30, 45 seconds, right? You could put more stuff in there, but the important parts here are twofold. You want them to like you and think that you know what you're talking about. If you can squeeze it in there, that you also, because you have an emotional attachment to this problem and you have expertise in the field, you discovered something really special that no one else would get, which gives you edge. You also want to be able to break down that there's a large market for this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's underserved or unserved, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the full pitch process, we go further in breaking down what that opportunity is in terms of like the three market forces. So is it valuable, meaning will someone pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it viable, meaning does the tech exist or did you figure out how to make it? And is it vital, meaning will people do they actually want it or need it, right? And if you can do that early on, you allow them in their head to check the boxes that say, oh, this is a good idea. Where people will do this wrong is say, hi, my name's Garrett. You know how everyone really hates project management tools? Well, we made this really awesome project management tool that everyone's actually going to like to use.
Right.
And, it does this and it does that. You know how it's such a pain when you do that? Like that immediately, you're not talking to the investor, you're talking to someone else, right? So I'll stop there. I know there was a lot of talking, but
no, and you're fine, I think. But there's two. You used the two words that were very interesting, being the word model and systems. And I'm saying that, business model being one word, quote unquote, and then systems, right? And I'm saying that because a lot of times we don't always know what that model and or system really are. We don't know how to differentiate it. We don't always know how to explain it, especially because we're new into this space. We say, hey, we have a passion for this, but we don't always have those building blocks necessarily. So how important is it for us to have that system in place before we even talk to an investor?
Yeah, I think you need to know what you're doing. Now, there's a case you could make, and I would say probably pre 2022, you could get away with a lot more stuff when money was free, and everything was great. Certainly now, I don't know. There's an angle where people say, hey, figure out the model later. If you have a really brilliant distribution strategy and you can raise on the idea that, hey, we're going to burn cash to go capture this market and figure out what we're going to do with it later, that's cool. Most people can't do that. That's more like the Uber or the DoorDash model of like, hey, just raise tons of VC money to go flood the market, drive the prices down artificially, and then force everyone out, and then you own it. Again, most people can't do that. That's not really. It's not a super repeatable strategy. So outside of that, you should have a general idea of, how much are people wanting to pay for this and in what model? Like, is this something they want to pay subscription for? Nowadays, everyone hates extra subscriptions, but if you're doing something really valuable, that's a great deal, right?
Right.
I pay like $16 a month for Envato Elements, which is just
yes.
If you do anything with any kind of design or video or audio or whatever, that is the best thing in the world. I would cut Adobe before I cut that. I hate Adobe. I don't want to get like 56 for that. I'm very close. Figma's getting there, but that is so good that I'm happy to pay it because it's worth 100 times that in the amount of time it saves you, right? So if you know your audience and you do those interviews or just test pricing, whatever, you have an idea like, hey, this is actually valuable. A lot of people will do the thing where they have a solution in search of a problem where this is usually developers that do this, but they'll go build something that they're interested in or whatever. And then they didn't ask anyone if they wanted it or needed it. They don't know if people would pay for it or not. And then you end up having this thing that you built out that nobody cares about and nobody's going to pay you for. So you should always factor in, not necessarily, I would be more in the camp of like, try to solve meaningful problems. If you're doing that, people are going to pay for them. Some people will go in the camp of, I'm going to figure out how to make money and then retroactively solve the problem from that perspective. But I think the way I look at it fundamentally is, a business is a system that solves a specific problem for a specific person repeatedly, sustainably, and profitably, right? And ideally at scale if we're in startups, right? Not every business has to scale, but and if you think about it like that, part of profitably and sustainably, you have to be able to make the business continue. Unless you want to do one thing one time for one person, then you're broke, right?
Right. and I'm gonna tell you the reason why I laughed about Envato Market, right? I mean, Envato Market / Element, and I laughed because for the longest time I was doing everything. I went to school for graphic design and information technology, all these things, and so I was using Illustrator and Photoshop and trying to do everything from scratch. And then I come across this one little software place First it was and it wasn't even called Story Blocks. I forgot what it was called first. But I came across them, and then came across Envato. And I didn't realize that some of those processes through that helped to streamline my processes as far as getting stuff out to the clients, whatever it might have been. Even though it might have, like you said, it might have cost a few little dollars here and there, but also in my workflow, it probably cost me 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then on top of that, in that, for me, I enjoy getting some of the free downloads because it gives me ideas as far as if I'm doing a commercial, hey, here's some music ideas or whatever it is. So sometimes we don't value those things or we're not always aware of what's always out there. So I'm just going to use Envato even for yourself. Could you share how you even had come across something like that?
I think it must have been, I used to, I started a long time ago doing design as a hobby, and eventually I was freelancing, and I through a series of weird circumstances ended up at a design agency based out of Raleigh. They had an account for it, and I just ended up. I was never actually officially designing for the company. I was director of ops, so I just managed and trained the designers, and by the end of it, I did everything. I was, running clients, and that's how I started my own, because like I could do this better. But we had Envato, and I was like, oh my god, this is a game changer. And so I mean, there's so much stuff, and especially and this to tie it back in with decks, like 99 out of 100 people are absolutely terrible at design, and it's not something that you can learn without spending massive amounts of time and also having a creative eye. Like you cannot teach people to have good design taste. Right. It does not matter how much you do it, which is fine if you can just accept that and then say, oh, I could just download a template for that. Right. Great. Most people would be way better served if they just downloaded the template when they did their deck and then changed as little as possible. Like change colors, change fonts, replace your images, do nothing else. Like leave everything where it was at the size that it's at. Because the design component of decks is actually so minuscule as far as the impact of it. There we can talk about like some of the mechanics of that in more detail. Like there's really complicated things you can think about, how people's eyes move, or like how you position certain visual things to be persuasive. But like most people will not. That is not something you're going to pick up in this conversation. But yeah, I mean, templates. There's very, very little reason for most startups before you have real money to spend tons of money on design, spend tons of money on a website. Unless you're doing a website and that's like your primary sales channel and people are buying online, that's a different conversation. Or if you're doing lots of conversion, that's different. But most people in most startups have what I call a business card website, which is, it says a small amount of information about you so that you exist if people look you up. And it should look nice and serious and not like a terrible WordPress or Wix kind of thing. But is that actually delivering value to you? Not really. Just use a template. Right. There's so many good ones now too.
Right. And I brought that up. I'm glad at first that you brought it up, because those type of things that we don't value, because it now if you're going to do this pitch, it doesn't look like everyone else. Hopefully, right? Because if everyone's going to PowerPoint pages, Google Slides, everybody's going to look exactly. You'll be able to sit down and say, all right, I know what program that is, because it's free, it's available, it's across the board. And sometimes those type of things just differentiate you just a little bit. That's going to say, hey, you know what? They put a little bit more effort into this. So I think those are the type of things that we don't always understand the value, even something like that. As much as the content and knowing our systems and things like that, sometimes, like you said, some of that very little variation in our visual elements work as well.
Yeah. And I would say too, like, what you don't want to do, like, I don't think design is so much less important than people think with decks, but a really ugly deck will torpedo you. Right. Having a beautiful one is not necessarily the most important. I wish it was more important. I love making really pretty stuff, but like, yeah, I honestly cannot say that I think that that's a huge value add.
I agree.
Which is sad. That's part of why, I used to do a lot more branding stuff.
Yeah.
And I've always worked with early stage startups. And I realized at a certain point, I was like, man, I love doing all this stuff, but I don't know that this is like the thing they need right now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's different. You'll sporadically see an early stage company that usually is like coming out of the Bay with like an A-list team where they launch and everything's gorgeous, but they're like obviously well capitalized and they have access to a lot of resources. If you're prioritizing, I actually was just talking to a founder about this. If you're prioritizing stuff in the early stages, like you really should be thinking about like, is this going to make sales? Is this going to increase, traffic or word of mouth or something like that? Is this going to help me demonstrate traction if I'm raising, that's your core set of activities. So if your stuff is hideous, you can go get templates and easily become at least mediocre, if not good. Right. Getting to great design is there's a huge gulf there. Right. And it's insanely expensive to do that. And it's just not, it's not a good use of funds in the early stages.
Yeah. And I'm bringing that up because sometimes we do concentrate on certain things to make things look pretty. Again, emotional attachment, thinking that, hey, it's going to move the masses, but everyone is not moved by that. Some of it is understanding your business model, your system, who your target market, all those type of things. And so, and that's the reason why it's funny, because a lot of people, again, who listen to this show, they're in the beginning stages of this. They want to talk, find out how can I get to sponsors, investors, whatever it is. But I think it has to look pretty and have all these bells and whistles and have all these flowers and, model, whatever it might be. So I think this type of conversation is important because of that, because of who this audience really is and where they need to really focus and concentrate on.
For sure. Yeah. I'll give you the counterexample that proves this point really effectively. Like, presumably everyone who's listening to this at some point has seen a ClickFunnels website.
Yes.
They are all ugly. I've seen one once that was like, it's clearly built on ClickFunnels, so this one's pretty good. But ClickFunnels is worth like infinite money. Right. And if it's not pretty, people use it because it works. Right. So I think people spend a lot of time. And I think it really comes down to, it's hard to know when you're a first-time founder or an early founder, what actually matters. And in reality, what actually matters is things that relate to generating revenue or making the product so good. Presumably at that point, you also have started generating revenue, right? But making it so good that it will start marketing itself. I would much rather use an ugly tool that's easy to use than a beautiful tool that's confusing. And in reality, you end up getting ugly things that are confusing. People understand neither of those things, but yeah, I mean, it's not about what it looks like. It's about how it solves the problem for people and how you get that message in front of people. I think that's so much more important. There's a famous saying, which is first-time founders focus on product, second-time founders focus on distribution, which is, I think, like everyone should have that like written on their mirror and see that every morning. Because that's the trap you fall into is I'm going to make this beautiful, perfect thing. It's going to be awesome. And then what you're really thinking about is, what do I want? What do I like? What do I feel good doing? Not how am I helping my customer have their problem solved in such a way that they keep coming back to have their problem solved and then tell their friends to come have their problem solved as well. Right.
So how do I learn to start to shift that mentality of, hey, I have to feel good about it necessarily. I mean, you got to feel good about your product overall, right? But how do I take some of my passion out of it so that way I could be more logical in this process, maybe a little more analytical in this process? How do I dumb down me and thinking about the other person?
Yeah, a lot of it is like you have to go through this kind of ego death experience. And I'll speak to this from my own personal experience because I was terrible at this, which is why I learned, right? For a long time. And when I left the design agency I was at, I started my own design agency, and I wrote philosophy for a long time in my past. I love philosophy. I love really heady, like metaphysics, all that complicated stuff. It's just a passion of mine, right? So when I started well, I guess the context for this. So one of the things I learned when I was at the design agency is when you start a design project, there's a lot of work you do before you start designing stuff that makes it way better, right? So we had a sprint that we would do that when I worked there, we would do it in an hour, right? And we would often end up like not getting enough detail on certain things. So I was like, if we just took 2 hours to do this, we could make it perfect, you know, or at least take as long as it takes to do it right. So not really a sprint at that point, but I still called them that. And I had a project that I worked on in the background because I was like, well, what if we did more sprints for other stuff and we could get into like, you know, business modeling and talk about product expansion and all this other stuff. So I ended up, we never got to use it, but I made a series of 4 sprints to really, really do comprehensive stuff, which would end up taking like 8 to 10 hours to do, which I called business philosophy because I did not understand at that point that philosophy is the worst word you can use to explain the value of anything. Because to most people, philosophy means I work at Starbucks. I have a philosophy degree. Fortunately, I dodged the degree bullet on that front. So anyway, so when I started my agency, it was business philosophy and design. And I was able to do business like that, but it was mostly because the people that knew me were like, I don't know what Garrett's talking about, but I like him and trust him and his work is great. So did that for a while. It was impossible to market. I really suffered from that, but I was stubborn and I was like, no, I'm going to make it a thing. And then eventually like clicked in my head. It was like, it does not matter what I think about this. Right. Because I realized I could do all the stuff I was doing and not tell people that it was business philosophy because that's not, nobody wants that. Right. Even though they need it. Right. What they want is, oh, I want to have a simpler understanding of my business. Right. I want to have better messaging. Right. I want to have the ability to communicate the stuff that I care about or the importance of this brand to my customers. Right. Philosophy gets you to all those things. You just don't have to call it that. They don't need to know that's what we're doing.
Right.
So that was when I switched from Ion, my old business, into Lucid. And the premise of Lucid was like, it's going to be the simplest possible. The branding is simple. There's like 3 colors. There's, you know, the language is simple. We don't use any big words. Nothing's complicated, which then, you know, that was sort of like worked into the deck stuff, right? Because I was at the beginning of Lucid, I was doing more. I was still doing branding and websites, but websites are torture to do and branding is very, very hard to sell and communicate the value of. But decks are awesome because the leverage is nuts. You know, I mean, like a good pitch is the difference between you getting millions of dollars or $0. There's no in between. You don't get halfway with an investor, right? They either think it's worth what you said it's worth or 0. So that's a tremendous amount of leverage, which I found really helped to move away from some of the, you know, the other stuff I was doing was really hard. Like branding, it's very cool to have a good brand, but like, is that worth $100,000? I don't know.
Right.
Like, huge companies sell for that, but like it's all, there's last note on that. There's a design brief that Pepsi got produced for them when they rebranded from the old Pepsi logo to the current Pepsi logo. It's online. If you look it up, you just Google like Pepsi rebrand guide or something like that. But they spent like at least $1 million on this, and it is the dumbest, most terrible. Like they made up such nonsense in there. There's like they're talking about like the Earth's magnetic fields and like Da Vinci and Pythagoras, and it's like I know you guys made the logo and then wrote all the stuff afterwards to justify the price tag. My point with that is that's how they have to like make up that this is $1 million worth of work. It's like, no, you're just doing Pepsi's brand. They can pay you $1 million. That's why it's $1 million worth of work. You know what I mean?
Wow. And as I'm listening to you, because I hear you talk about what you used to do in the past, you know, and how it has been a foundation for where you are today. And sometimes I run into a lot of people who forget where they were, where they've come from, and they kind of lose track. And so how has that been a great foundation for you to remember, like, hey, this is where I was, you know, I learned from this situation and now I'm better for it today, because sometimes like I said, we lose track of that. So how has that helped you?
Yeah, I have the blessing and the curse of being the most stubborn person alive. So in the same way that I suffer from like probably overcommitting to the bit and trying too hard for too long on things that are not the right way to do stuff, I also, by the time I get done with that, I'm like, okay, I'm never doing that again. I got it out of my system. You know what I mean? But it's also, it's cool because I dropped out of school to start. I failed out of school because I was not happy being in school. And I really only went to school to get out of my terrible hometown. And from there, I had a week before I failed out, a buddy of mine I used to do sales with hit me up. We started business, right? So coming from that, where we tried everything that we could in an industry that we knew nothing about, we got nowhere over the course of the year. That's a humbling experience, I guess you would say. So everything that I've done in the last decade that is anywhere above that level of stuff is like, I'm very grateful for that. And it's cool because so recently I officially started last week, but this is a client of mine that I've now come on board as CMO with. I realized as I started this job, I've done branding and marketing, all this kind of stuff for, forever. But I was like, oh, wow, I know a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, because I like to assume coming into stuff, like, I don't know what's going on. I don't necessarily know what needs to happen, but if you put your head down, you can figure it out. Right. And the cool part is just, over the time of both of my companies, the two service companies and all the other stuff I did, it's like, oh, I've worked with like hundreds of startups at this point. I've seen so much stuff, there's a lot of people, or I'd say most people have a couple jobs in their life. And nowadays it's more, but it's not like 20 most of the time. It's like, your full career might be like 10 or 12 or something like that. But if you think about like every client is like a little job. And I also had, before that, I had like 20 actual jobs. So like you end up seeing so much stuff, and eventually you realize that like one of the things that really kills early stage companies is ego. I would say like one of the primary hurdles that separates companies from like making it past seed is like personality defects in the founder. So I try to be aware of that. And I spent a lot of time like introspecting, like, okay, how am I screwing this up? Right. Like how am I in the way of this working? And if you have enough, you blow up enough startup ideas over the years, you kind of just say, okay, yeah, I'm going to keep my ego in check and try and be chill about this,
Wow. Oh, and I had to bring that up, and I know everybody, I know we're past our 25 minutes normally, but I'm really enjoying this conversation because there's a lot of things that, as I've seen and talked to other entrepreneurs and things like that, where our feelings and our, like you say, our ego and maybe not understanding the lessons we've learned along the way, and now we're ready to talk to an investor, and now it sounds all confused. Now it sounds all over the place because now our messaging is all messed up. And so that's why I was kind of, I was getting to that point, because when it's time to talk to an investor, we might, even though they say, hey, your 30-second elevator pitch is really only 5. You may not even have 30 seconds, and so that's why I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit more to make sure that, hey, you know what, let's understand where we're going, what we're doing, and how we're getting there. And that time that, hey, yes, they might have a cup of coffee, but they're not trying to finish that cup of coffee with you. Not necessarily.
Yeah. The first pitch that I ever did. So while I had my first agency, I ended up doing, this is usually how it works for me, is I'll end up doing some like minor project for people, and by the end of it, they hire me to do like a serious job. So I had a client that I got hired to make 30 Instagram posts for, and then I ended up doing some other stuff, and then I was chief of staff. So when I was there, we raised, they had raised $1 million before I got there. We raised $600K when I was there. That was the first deck I got to work on, right? Long, irrelevant story to the point I'm going to make, but we were running out of money. The model screwed up. So I was like, hey, you got to fire me and the design team and the marketing team, which I ran, because you guys got to pivot. So they pivoted. This is like the beginning of 2022 when crypto started blowing up. So this is a Web3 company, and it's a bad time, but they did extend the runway and they launched the pivoted version of their product. So anyway, so I was like, oh, dude, we raised some money. I'm great at this, not knowing how it worked. I should go try. I started, I had been working on an idea in the background for a couple of years, and I was like, why not? Let's go. I didn't realize also that the market had started slowly declining. So remember that in a second. That's going to be important. So anyway, I spent a couple months like building out a wireframe for the app I wanted to build, which is like a social platform that allows content creators to own their content, so they can monetize it directly, but also then it solves the censorship problem without you like actually solving the censorship problem. Because when you do that, you do the free speech platform and ends up making a really gross place most of the time. So a lot of people tried and died in that market. So I went out. I had an advisor who was later my co-founder for Lucid. He was just awesome. He did the work of 5 people. I had 5, but he got us our investor meetings. We had 5. The first time that I pitched, we got to slide 3, and they said, "Can you skip to the end, please?" So that was a terrible experience. And on the 5th pitch, we got an offer because I was like, I'm never going to have that happen again. I went super hard on it. It wasn't a good offer, and he wanted us to do some crazy stuff that had nothing to do with the roadmap because he was into a certain crypto chain, and it was just that would not be the move. So we didn't take the offer. This is also like in the same week that we got this offer. Actually, believe it or not, I was sitting in this room. This is my grandma's basement. I'm visiting family. So I was here a couple of years ago doing this, but Elon also bought Twitter that same week. So I was like, we got to jump. This isn't going to happen right now. Plus the market had continued to decline. So all the VCs ran away for a while. If you've been raising in the last several years, you know what I'm talking about. It's been very hard. But that was kind of, the experience of like, oh yeah, nobody has any patience. You have to hook them much faster than that. It's not about you. It's what I tell founders a lot is you're not the hero.
Right.
We use the hero's journey in the final version of the pitch process for coming up with their story, but the hero is not them. The hero is the person you're pitching. And so if you think about it from the perspective of the VC and you like get into their psychology, you exist to help them take their LP's money and make it worth something, right? It's essential that you do this. They're not going to do it themselves, which is why they're a VC and not a founder. Many of them were never founders, which is important to remember because a lot of them are bad at their jobs. But that thing is so essential because you have to play into their psychology. The trick is on the note of ego. You both have to have no ego because you have to realize it's not about you and be able to get into their head. You have to have quite a lot of ego because you have to you're playing a role for them. Right. You're like showing them that you're the person that's going to solve this, that they can trust and invest in, because they're in the early stages, they're investing in you. Right. And that's kind of a fun dance to do is like, can you both humble yourself and also play the part and be confident and not be looking for their approval, which is funny because so many of these things are contradictory, but you have to do all of them, right? You have to go in and say, I don't care what the outcome of this meeting is. I'm going to present this the best way that I can. And I'm going to maintain that neutrality so that if they want, if they have bad terms or if they have weird demands or they're going to come in, even though we desperately need the money because everyone does. Right. If we take their money, they're going to like in 2 rounds, like use their board seat to stage a coup and kick us out because they're not trustworthy people or whatever. Right. You have to do both of these things. Right. And I think getting to that place where it's very much like Zen. Like you have to be just present. You're not concerned with the outcome. You're just doing the action of pitching. You're not thinking about what could happen. And you're independent of the outcome of, I need something, because people can sense that, right? The best, this is actually a terrible example, but SBF, the guy who did who blew up that FTX, the company, he was like, went to jail. When he was raising, there's a story where he was on an investor call, like a Zoom, I think it was during COVID, and he was playing like League of Legends or something at the same time. And when the investors found out, they were like, oh my God, he must be amazing because he doesn't care at all. That's a terrible sign. And it also says something about how investors think, which is like, it's not a good reason to invest in the company. But we can extrapolate something from that terrible example, which is you have to like communicate. You're not desperate. You are independent of the outcome. And really what you're doing is not asking for money. You're giving people, the investors, the opportunity to partner with you if they're a good fit. You're selecting, right? Right. And if they don't jive with the mission, you don't want that because it's only going to be a nightmare. You're now married to this person that doesn't care what you're doing, and they're probably going to ruin your life on the back end.
Wow. I'm gonna tell you, Garrett. I mean, you keep giving up all this information, bro. Like, just, and so we're going to probably have to have a part 2 to this, Garrett. I'm gonna be honest with you, but but because of the people that are listening today, and they might be struggling with this and trying to understand which way they should go, and they have a great idea and don't know what to do with it before, again, going on Shark Tank, whatever it might be. Where can they find you and talk to you about something like this and talk, find out any other information and or other podcasts you might have been on?
Yeah, no, the easiest place is LinkedIn. I really should put all my podcasts on my website. My website's really just a funnel. So if you want to engage in pitch services, go to the website. If not, message me on LinkedIn. I post on there twice a day. In the morning, it's something educational. In the afternoon, it's a meme. So that's probably the easiest way. I'm happy to talk. As something I touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but sales and pitching are different. I'm not like a sales guy traditionally. So if you ever want to chat, I have often tell people like, hey, this is not a good fit. I'm not a pushy salesperson. So if you just want to talk about any of the stuff that we talked about or get feedback on your pitch, I'm happy to do it. If you go anywhere that I am online, you will find many links to my calendar. All the links go to the same place. Super easy. But yeah, happy to chat. Or, if you happen to be raising or something, I may know somebody that you could talk to. I don't have a huge investor network. They don't like me because I am a fisherman and they are fish. But you never know. I might have some other kind of like partner type person or something. So yeah, happy to chat.
Oh, okay, cool. It's funny. They don't like you because you're a fisherman. They fish. That's funny. I've never heard that one before. That's a great analogy.
I tried to make VC friends when I moved to Austin, and I had made like one. I see him once a year at a Christmas party.
Okay. Wow. That's funny. But I mean, so of course, all your information is going to be in the show notes, Garrett. So if everyone that's looking to become a better fisherman and buy a better pole, we're going to refer them to you to make that thing happen. But before I let you go, I got to ask you my question, Garrett. My would you rather question. So the question is, and now use your imagination. No parameters, no nothing, right? Just have fun. Would you rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road?
I like the fork because you know what you're giving up.
Okay.
Right. If you have 3 doors, there's one you don't, there's a lot of uncertainty. Like a fork, you're making it's like a black and white decision.
Right. So you like that straightforward, I'm either going left, I'm going right, and that's it.
Yep.
Yeah. You seem very straightforward like that, Garrett.
I try.
But see, sometimes, because of feelings and things like that, we kind of like, oh, ho-hum or whatever, and we have to understand that, hey, we have to be able to pivot no matter what our decision is, right? And, so every time you come to a fork, it's either going to be left or right. You're going to learn either way. You don't lose, you don't lose in all honesty. It's just what the value we put on what we learn in that process. So that's why I like the answer. I mean, because I'm pretty much the same way. It took me a while to get back to this point because, of course, we kind of doubt ourselves and things like that. So we go through a lull, that's just human nature. But, I kind of, I like that answer. Straight into the point. Thanks, Garrett.
I try. That's the whole brand, really. Simple.
Right. So, but I thank you very much for coming on the show. And I thank y'all for listening to the That Will Nevr Work podcast. And I'll talk to you just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chism on social media to stay connected and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?